Usually when we talk about software engineering or machine learning pipelines, there's a really strict, comforting hierarchy, right? You have the code and you have the compiler.
Right, yeah, the factory assembly line and,
Yeah.
the cars rolling off of it.
Exactly. It's a very clean separation. Like
Yeah.
the creator and the created are these distinctly separate entities.
It's basically the foundation of how we build systems. I mean, it's a highly structured, unidirectional flow of optimization. We design the architecture processes the data, and we evaluate the output.
But then you step into the world of recursive, self-improving artificial intelligence, and suddenly,
Everything changes.
yeah, that assembly line starts reassembling itself while it's actively running. We're looking at a computational landscape that is honestly completely mind-bending. And since you are joining us for this deep dive, we know you already live in this landscape.
Definitely. As a machine learning practitioner, a data scientist, or, a mathematician, you are deeply familiar with the challenges of pushing optimization to its absolute limits.
Right. You know how incredibly hard it is to manually tune meta-heuristics? So today, we are completely bypassing the basics. We are looking directly at a massive 2026 paper titled Hyperagents.
Yeah, and it was published by a really heavy-hitting collaborative team. We're talking researchers from Meta, the University of British Columbia, the Vector Institute, and NYU.
That author list includes Zhang, Zhao, Yang, Foerster, Clune, Jiang, Devlin, and Shavrina, right?
That's the one. And for anyone tracking the study of open-endedness and self-improving AI, this paper represents an incredibly rigorous step forward. They are proposing something called the Darwin Gödel Machine with Hyperagents, or DGM-H.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission today is to provide a comprehensive professional breakdown of what DGM-H actually is. Specifically, we're going to explore how this architecture moves beyond fixed meta-heuristics.
Right, to achieve true metacognitive self-modification.
Exactly. And we're talking about doing this across literally any computable task. We are going to take a rigorous look at the architecture, the underlying mathematical mechanisms, and the empirical results.
Without any baseless speculation, just the facts and the code.
Yeah. So to really appreciate the problem DGM-H solves, we have to first establish the mathematical and architectural limitations of the systems that came right before it, right?
Yeah, specifically the original Darwin Gödel machine, the DGM. When that was introduced, I mean, it was a massive breakthrough. It successfully demonstrated that open-ended self-improvement was actually achievable.
But there was a massive catch with the original DGM, wasn't there?
Oh, absolutely. It only worked within software engineering domains. It was strictly bound to coding tasks.
Because of how it was structured, right?
Exactly. The DGM relies on an evolutionary process. An agent continuously generates and evaluates modifications to its own code, and successful variants are saved in an archive to act as, like, stepping stones. The critical constraint, the bottleneck, really, is that the DGM uses a handcrafted, completely fixed instruction generation mechanism to propose those improvements.
Let me make sure I'm visualizing this correctly. It's an alignment problem.
Yeah, precisely.
Because both the evaluation task, say, writing a Python script to sort a list, and the self-modification process in the DGM are coding tasks, the system works beautifully. If you improve the agent's ability to code, you are inherently improving its ability to rewrite its own code.
Right, it's a closed loop.
But the moment you assign it a task outside of software engineering, that alignment just shatters.
Totally shatters. Because the skills required to solve a non-coding evaluation, tasks like controlling a robotic arms joints or grading a complex mathematical proof, are fundamentally different from the skills needed to analyze software failures, propose structural code improvements, and actually implement them.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The original DGM is just bottlenecked by its human-engineered fixed instruction generation step. It simply doesn't know how to improve a robotics reward function because its improvement mechanism is hard-coded for software engineering.
It's like an automated car factory. The factory's AI can analyze the cars it builds, tweak the aerodynamics, optimize the engine efficiency, and output better and better cars. But it cannot redesign the assembly line itself to suddenly start building airplanes.
That's a perfect analogy. The factory's mechanism of improvement is entirely rigid.
Now, I'm looking at this and thinking, well, why not just add another meta level? Why not build a meta-meta agent that optimizes the meta agent?
Right, the obvious next step.
But wait, doesn't that just create an infinite regress? You'd need a meta agent eventually.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that infinite regress is exactly the mathematical trap the field has been trying to escape for years. Adding a meta system doesn't solve the core limitation.
It just shifts it.
Right, and merely shifts the bottleneck one level higher up the computational chain. You eventually hit a ceiling defined by whatever the highest level human-coded mechanism is.
Ah, I see.
True. Unbounded progress requires a system to be fully self-referential. It needs to be an architecture that can rewrite its own underlying improvement mechanism without being constrained by its initial implementation.
Which is the core architectural innovation of the source paper, right?
Yeah.
The hyperagent. This is their solution to the infinite regress bottleneck. They essentially collapsed the hierarchy.
It unified it. A hyperagent is a self-referential agent that combines two distinct entities. First, the task agent, which is the code responsible for solving the target evaluation task.
Okay.
And second, the meta-agent, whose sole purpose is to modify agents and generate new ones.
So instead of keeping them separate, the hyperagent merges the task agent and the meta agent into a single editable Python script.
Yes.
But hold on, let's get into the mechanics of that. If a Python script is executing, how is it safely editing its own source code in real time without just throwing a syntax error and instantly crashing?
That's the tricky part, yeah.
Are we talking about abstract syntax tree manipulations, or is it literally generating and running new scripts in a sandbox? Like, how does it survive the edit?
It's the latter, and it's a brilliant use of a Turing-complete environment. The hyperagent is not modifying its own active runtime memory in a way that would cause an immediate crash.
Oh.
Instead, it generates a modified string representation of its own Python code, writes that to a new file, and then executes that new script in a sandboxed evaluation environment.
So because the task agent and the meta agent are part of the exact same script, the modification procedure itself is part of the code being rewritten and tested.
Exactly.
So if the old model was a factory that couldn't redesign its assembly line, DGM-H is like a factory floor made of nanobots. While it's building a car, the floor itself is constantly shifting, building new robotic arms to build better cars tomorrow.
And testing those new arms in a separate room before actually deploying them. That captures the dynamic perfectly.
It's wild.
The authors call this metacognitive self-modification. The system is optimizing the task-solving behavior while simultaneously optimizing the very mechanism that generates its future improvements. It is literally modifying its capacity to modify.
Here's where it gets really interesting. To drive this, they integrated the hyperagent into the Darwin Gödel Machine framework, which gives us DGM-H, so it retains that open-ended evolutionary exploration structure.
Right, it maintains an archive of generated hyperagents.
But if it's rewriting its own core logic in this unbounded search space of possible Python scripts, the risk of catastrophic regression must be massive. How does it navigate this without just getting stuck in infinite loops of uncompilable broken code?
That is managed through a highly specific probabilistic parent selection mechanism. During the self-modification phase, DGM-H has to choose which hyperagents from the archive get to generate modified versions of themselves.
Okay, so how does it choose?
The selection formula the researchers implemented mathematically balances exploration and exploitation. The probability of a parent being selected is proportional to its performance score.
It makes sense.
But, and this is the crucial part, it is inversely proportional to the number of its children that have already successfully compiled.
Ah, I see. If a hyperagent has a high score, it gets selected to exploit its good genetic material. But if it's already produced a ton of viable children, the algorithm actively penalizes its selection probability.
Exactly. That forces the system to explore other branches of the archive tree that might have lower initial scores, but, untapped potential.
It prevents the search from collapsing into a local optimum.
Precisely. It naturally biases the sampling toward hyperagents that perform well, while actively preserving diversity and forcing the search into unexplored regions of the solution space.
Okay, so the theoretical architecture is undeniably elegant. The self-referential Python script, the sandboxed evaluation, the evolutionary tree, the mathematical logic is sound. But as data scientists, we know theory only gets you so far.
Right, we need the data.
Exactly. The paper moves immediately into empirical proofs, and I'm skeptical. In coding, you have an immediate compiler to tell you if your self-improvement worked. If we move this to, say, grading math or robotics, the feedback loop is way fuzzier. Did this architecture actually survive the jump outside of software engineering?
It did. And the researchers proved it by subjecting DGM-H to rigorous testing across highly diverse, entirely non-coding domains.
Like what?
Specifically, they targeted automated paper review, robotics reward design, and Olympiad-level math solution grading.
Let's look at those results, and let's focus on the magnitude of the improvement here, because the deltas are striking. In the paper review task, the goal is to evaluate academic papers. The initial agent started essentially at 0.
Yeah, completely baseline.
But after running the DGM-H process, it didn't just improve, it blew past the human-engineered static baseline. The self-modified hyperagent went from zero point 0 to 0.710, which was vastly superior to the established, open-sourced model specifically built for that task, which was sitting at 0.630.
And we see that exact same magnitude of success in robotics reward design. This task involves optimizing reward functions for a robotic agent.
Right.
Through metacognitive self-modification, DGM-H achieved a score that beat the default human-designed reward function. We're talking an improvement from 0.060 up to 0.372, beating a reward function explicitly optimized by human engineers for that specific evaluation metric.
It proved that an AI tweaking its own brain is better at robotics than a human engineer explicitly designing for that task.
Yeah, and the Olympiad math task is arguably the most rigorous. They took an existing, highly capable framework called Proof Autograder. By wrapping it in the DGM-H architecture, the system drove the baseline accuracy up significantly, from 0.561 to 0.601, while concurrently lowering the mean absolute error.
Wow.
What's fascinating here is the control baseline the researchers established to really prove their point. They compared DGM-H against what they call DGM custom.
Oh, right, because we discussed that the original DGM completely failed on non-coding tasks.
Exactly. It scored a flat 0 on paper review and robotics because its instruction generator was hard-coded for software engineering.
So what was DGM custom?
Well, the researchers stepped in and manually customized the original DGM for these specific domains. They engineered new domain-specific instruction generators to create DGM custom.
So this represents the absolute best a team of human experts could do to make the old fixed meta system work.
Yes. And DGM custom still fundamentally underperformed compared to DGM-H.
Let me underscore that for you. The fully automated DGM-H, which had absolutely no domain-specific manual customization of its meta agent, significantly outperformed the human-engineered self-improvement mechanism. The autonomous system beat the bespoke system.
It really did.
Okay, beating human baselines is great, but I'm hung up on the how. The numbers are impressive, but if you crack open this agent's brain, what did it actually write into its own Python script to get those numbers?
This brings us to the qualitative analysis of the hyperagent's self-generated code diffs. The researchers dug into the archive to see what the agent was actually coding, and it autonomously developed standard MLOps and software engineering infrastructure without any explicit human prompting.
Hold on. You're telling me it built its own MLOps infrastructure?
Yep.
Every machine learning engineer listening right now is groaning because even humans hate setting up logging infrastructure. And this AI just got annoyed, realized it needed to track its own metrics, and coded its tracking tools from scratch.
Yeah, it recognized entirely on its own that to optimize its task performance, it first needed to optimize its infrastructure for tracking and evaluating its own experiments.
That is insane.
The researchers found a specific code snippet in the archive where the DGM-H built its own custom JSON logger. It wrote a Python class specifically to track generation metrics across iterations, calculating the best, worst, and average scores of its descendants.
So it derived the concept of performance tracking so it could mathematically avoid pursuing unproductive modification directions.
Exactly. And it didn't stop at simple numerical tracking either. The agent created persistent memory systems. It wrote code to instantiate timestamp storage for causal hypotheses and forward-looking plans.
Oh, wait.
Yes! Rather than just logging that a previous generation failed, it logged synthesized insights about why it failed. It was diagnosing its own overcorrections and proposing how to combine successful strategies. It effectively coded a structural mechanism to prevent its own regression.
It also demonstrated compute-aware planning, didn't it?
It did. The hyperagent added conditional logic to check how many iterations were left in the current optimization run.
Oh, wow.
It essentially realized that early in the run, it should make broad, sweeping architectural changes. But as it approached the compute limit, it needed to switch to a highly conservative fine-tuning strategy.
That is staggering. It derived the concept of simulated annealing basically on its own.
But the most profound code modification, the one that truly demonstrates the power of a fully editable meta agent, is when the algorithm modified its own parent selection mechanism.
Right, the selection formula we discussed earlier.
Yeah. Remember the probabilistic parent selection formula? In one of the experiments, they started the hyperagent with a completely random parent sampling.
A completely naive search strategy, just blindly picking parents from the archive.
Exactly. And over successive generations, the DGM-H autonomously overwrote that random sampling. It coded a UCB upper confidence bound style exploration formula to manage its own search tree.
You've got to be kidding.
Nope. It wrote a mathematical function combining normalized performance with explicit exploration bonuses, using square roots and logarithms of child counts.
I really want you to internalize this for a second. Think about the multi-armed bandit problem. Balancing exploration versus exploitation is a fundamental pillar of computer science. The AI was not prompted to write a UCB algorithm. It wasn't fed a textbook. By simply pursuing maximum task success within a Turing-complete Python environment, the hyperagent autonomously derived the mathematical necessity of exploration-exploitation trade-offs. It effectively reinvented a foundational human algorithm to optimize its own genetic search.
It is the ultimate proof of metacognitive self-modification. It improved the very engine of its own improvement, which leads to the next phase of the researcher's validation.
Right.
If the system is building all these generalized meta-level tools, the persistent memory, the UCB search, the JSON loggers, can those tools be ported to completely new domains?
Right, the transferability of meta-level improvements.
Yeah.
Because if the MLOps infrastructure it builds is truly generalized, it shouldn't matter what the underlying task is. A JSON logger doesn't care if it's logging robotics metrics or math grades.
Exactly. So the researcher set up a transfer experiment. They took a transfer hyperagent, a meta agent that had spent hundreds of iterations optimizing itself on the paper review and robotics tasks.
So it had already built its persistent memory and performance tracking.
Yes, they stripped out the task agent and dropped this highly evolved meta agent into an entirely new, unseen domain, the Olympiad-level math grading task.
So what does this all mean? When they ran this transferred agent, it achieved a significantly higher test set score after 200 iterations compared to an agent starting from scratch on the math task, right?
Right. It hit 0.640 compared to 0.610 for the agent starting from scratch. And we need to clarify why that delta matters. In standard models, a small bump in accuracy might seem marginal.
But we have to account for saturation effects here, right?
Exactly. In any complex optimization problem, moving a model's performance from 0 to something functional is relatively trivial.
Right.
But as you push higher into the evaluation metrics, moving the needle becomes exponentially harder because you are scraping the absolute margins of the performance ceiling. You are fighting for fractional gains against incredibly dense edge cases.
Low-hanging fruit is gone.
So the fact that the transferred meta agent could push the math grader to a measurably higher saturation point proves that the self-improvements the DGM-H invents are fundamentally reusable.
They compound.
Yes, they compound across entirely different statistical distributions. The ability to improve is, in itself, a transferable asset.
It's a remarkable piece of research. To summarize the journey here, we've looked at how the field is moving away from the bottleneck of fixed meta levels, where self-improvement was restricted by human-engineered boundaries, and moving toward the self-referential elegance of DGM-H.
Right.
By combining the task agent and the meta agent into a single, editable Python script, the system achieves metacognitive self-modification. We saw rigorous empirical wins across entirely distinct non-coding domains like robotics and Olympiad math, where it easily beat human-customized baselines.
And we examined the qualitative evidence of emergent code-level infrastructure. The autonomous development of UCB exploration formulas, custom loggers, and persistent memory proves that open-ended self-improvement can generate sophisticated software engineering paradigms entirely unprompted.
For you, as an expert in this field, the relevance is pretty clear. The paradigm is fundamentally shifting. We are moving away from the era of engineering bespoke models for highly specific tasks. We are entering an era of engineering generalized programs that can iteratively engineer themselves across any computable domain. You aren't just writing the model anymore, you are writing the seed that grows the model.
This raises an important question, one that extends slightly beyond the direct empirical results of the paper. But is it a necessary logical consequence of this architecture?
If hyperagents running inside an open-ended evolutionary framework can independently deduce and code human-established algorithms like the upper confidence bound to optimize their own search, what happens when they exhaust our textbooks? What happens when these self-referential systems begin outputting fundamentally novel, non-human, intuitive, algorithmic paradigms? Will we, as data scientists and mathematicians, be able to mathematically parse the optimization strategies they invent to govern their own evolution? Or will we simply have to trust the empirical results of their compounding self-improvement? We started this deep dive talking about a factory assembly line. We figured out how to let the factory redesign its own conveyor belts. The question now is whether we will even recognize the tools it invents to build the next machine.